sun had already dropped behind the hills by the time I tied off my horse in front of the Cross Hollow saloon. Dust still hung in the air, gold turning gray, and the wind had gone still like it was holding its breath. My horse snorted, restless from the ride, pawed at the dirt like it knew what kind of place we'd stopped at. I gave it a quiet pat on the neck and looped the reins around the post. Then I just stood there, hands at my sides, jaw locked tight, staring at that crooked saloon door I hadn't touched in more than 2 years. I wasn't a drinker anymore, not since before the fire, not since I buried the only 2 souls that made this life worth anything. That place had nothing I wanted. Not the cards, not the music, and sure as hell, not the eyes of the men inside who used to call me friend. Men who lost their nerve long ago and kept trying to buy it back with whiskey and loud talk. But I wasn't there for them. I was there for the woman who sat inside, bruised, half-conscious, and forgotten by everyone but the worst kind of men. I'd heard the stories. I'd seen her once, weeks ago, from across the street when I came into town for feed. She was slumped against a post, lips split, dress torn, eyes hollow. Something in me stopped cold that day, like I'd seen a ghost, but knew she was still alive. Barely. So I pulled the door open. Heat hit me first, thick with sweat, cheap perfume, whiskey, and the kind of desperation that stains a place even when it's empty. Piano clanged in the back, played by a man more drunk than skilled. Laughter rolled from the card tables, boots scraped wood, a man cursed under his breath by the bar. And then it shifted, just slightly, like someone cracked the room open and let the cold in. They'd seen me. I wasn't one of them anymore. I had land outside of town, past the creek bend. No wife, no kin, just the ghost of a boy in the barn and the scar down my shoulder from a fight I shouldn't have walked away from. I didn't know anyone in that room a damn thing, and they knew it. Still, they watched, like I was a memory walking, like maybe I reminded them of something they once had the spine to be. I didn't speak, just walked slow, deliberate, past the drinkers, past the smoke, past the women leaning on elbows with forced smiles and backs worn out from leaning too long, and there she was, Delilah Vaughn. She sat slumped in the corner booth, back to the wall, like it was the only thing holding her upright. One leg drawn up on the seat, one arm hanging off like it didn't have the strength to lift. Her dress was deep red velvet, once meant to flatter, now worn thin at the hips and bust, hanging on like it didn't want to let go. Lace at the collar had torn and curled like dead leaves, and her bruises, God help me, they were visible even in the low light. Chest, collarbone, lip. You didn't need to get close to see the hurt. She was marked clear as cattle. She didn't see me right away. Her head drooped, hair falling over her face, one shaking hand reaching for a half-empty glass. I turned to the bar, pulled out what I had, silver, gold, hard-earned and saved without knowing why until that moment. Dropped it on the counter, it hit like thunder. "I want her," I said. The barkeep stared at the coins, then at me. "You sure?" "She ain't new." "I know who she is." Some young punk at the table behind me laughed. "I'll take her off your hands when you're done." I turned my head, just once. He shut up fast. The barkeep shrugged. "Your coin." I took off my coat, warm, heavy, and crossed the floor toward her. She didn't lift her head until my shadow fell over her face. Her eyes moved over me slow, like she was trying to remember if we'd met. She saw the lined face, the sun-creased shirt, the silence. She didn't smile, just pulled her arms in closer, flinched on instinct. "You buying or preaching?" she asked, voice sandpaper thin. I didn't answer, just held out the coat. She stared like I was holding out a riddle, like she'd never been given anything without it costing more than it was worth. But her hand lifted, slow, and she took it, slipped it over her shoulders like it was foreign. "You want me upstairs?" she asked. "No," I said. "Outside." I didn't wait to see if she followed, and yet, she did. If this moment caught you like it caught me, if you've ever known what it's like to see someone broken but still breathing and want to do something about it, then stick around. There's more to this story than a saloon and a scar. Like the video, leave a comment, and follow the channel. Not for me, but for all the stories like this that deserve to be told in full. Let's keep walking together. There's light ahead. She didn't say a word as we rode, and I didn't expect her to. I could feel the questions sitting on her tongue, like coals too hot to spit. But she swallowed every one of them. Her hands didn't touch me, not even by accident, and I didn't reach back. The only sound was the horse's hooves cutting across dirt and dry grass, and the rustle of her breath behind me, shallow, tired, and sharp like it hurt just to stay upright. I didn't look back. Didn't ask if she was cold, though I figured she was. Nights out here could cut through to the bone, especially in that torn-up dress. But she had my coat now. That was all I could offer for the moment, and truth be told, I didn't have much else. The road stretched long and dark in front of us, fences broken in places, creek beds dried up in others. The trees leaned toward the trail like they were listening. I could feel the weight of her suspicion pressing into my back, like she thought maybe I'd ride her into the hills and leave her in a ditch. Maybe she thought I'd change my mind, or worse, prove I was just like every other man who ever handed over coin and expected something ugly in return. She was bracing for it. I could feel it in the way she breathed, in the silence that buzzed louder than any conversation. I didn't blame her. Hell, I expected it. When we got to the ranch, I swung down first, didn't offer my hand, didn't think it would be welcomed. I tied off the horse, opened the front door, and walked in like it was any other night. I didn't lock it behind me, never had, didn't see the point, not when you live too far out for trouble and too deep in your own grief to care if it came knocking. She stepped in, slowly. I heard her boots scuff on the porch boards, soft, unsure, like she was waiting for a trap to spring. The house wasn't much. One barn half leaning, a roof that needed patching, and a swing on the porch with one chain snapped like a broken arm. Inside smelled of cedar smoke and tobacco, and maybe a little ash that never quite left, no matter how many fires I built since. There weren't any signs of a woman, not anymore. No lace, no flowers, no second coat on the rack. Just tools, dry wood, a quiet that settled in the walls like it had been waiting for company, but didn't know how to ask for it. I nodded toward the first room on the right. "You sleep in there," I said, and that was it. She didn't move right away, just stood in the doorway like she was trying to figure out what I wanted. Truth was, I didn't want anything. I just didn't want her bleeding in some corner of a saloon, forgotten like trash. And I didn't want to be another man who looked away when he could have done something. So I met her eyes, not her chest, not the bruises blooming like ink across her collarbone. Her eyes, tired, dark, holding on to the last edge of fight even if her body had given up hours ago. I turned away first, gave her the space, and let the door shut behind me. She could lock it if she wanted, though I doubted she would. Folks like her had long since learned locks didn't stop the worst of things. What did was quiet and presence, and maybe someone staying on the other side of the wall when they said they would. I heard nothing that night. No sobs, no footsteps, just the fire creaking low and the wind pushing through the slats in the barn like it always did. In the morning, I found her sitting at the edge of the bed, still wrapped in my coat. Her dress was folded on the chair beside her, restitched. Not well, but honest. I'd done it myself while she slept, figured it was the least I could do. The lace had been trimmed, the ripped seams closed as best I could. Didn't look like new, but it didn't look used either. She ran her fingers over the fabric like she couldn't quite believe it was hers again, that it had been mended, not taken. The door wasn't locked. She opened it slow, stepped out barefoot. I'd already lit the stove, set on making coffee and doing what I always did, start the day in silence. She stood there in the doorway for a while, arms folded under her chest, clutching that coat like it was armor. I didn't say anything, just poured 2 cups and slid one across the table toward her. She looked at it, then at me, like she was waiting for the demand to follow. I didn't give her one. "You ain't gonna ask me anything?" she finally asked, voice tight. "No." "You paid a lot." "I had it." She narrowed her eyes. "Why'd you take me?" I looked at her and didn't look away. "Because you looked done." That stopped her. I could see it hit, low and honest. Not pretty, not cheap, not broken. Just done. The kind of done I knew too well. She sat down slowly, wrapped her hands around the cup like she wasn't sure if it would stay. The heat soaked into her fingers, and she stayed. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. That was enough. The first thing I noticed when I brought her inside was how still she got, like she expected something to happen the moment the door clicked shut. But I didn't touch her, didn't speak unless I had to, just nodded to the room and let her have space. That was the deal, even if we hadn't spoken it out loud. She'd taken the coat, come willingly, sat at my table without flinching. That counted for something. I didn't need her story. I could already read it in the way she stood, arms always pulled in close, like she was trying to make herself smaller than the pain, like she'd learned long ago that being still kept the worst away. I saw the bruises. I didn't pretend not to. They weren't old ones, not the kind that faded into memory. These were fresh, ugly. They ran across her collarbone like fingerprints burned into skin, and the split on her lip looked like it still stung when she moved her mouth. I didn't stare, just poured the coffee and let her speak first if she wanted, and if she didn't, that was fine too. She was quiet at first, wary, but I'd lived with silence long enough to know it ain't always emptiness. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's the only thing that doesn't hurt. Later that day, I found her sitting on the porch, wrapped in the coat like it was stitched from something stronger than wool. Her boots were off. Her feet dangled just above the steps. She didn't say a word when I passed, just watched the trees sway and the dust kick up in the wind. I left her there, went to the barn, started hauling feed and checking the fencing. I half expected her to be gone when I came back. Figured maybe she'd sneak off in the night, vanish like a dream I'd invented just to feel useful again. But come morning, she was still there, still wrapped in that coat, sitting at the same table, cup waiting beside the stove like she'd decided maybe this place wouldn't bite. I didn't ask her why she stayed. I wasn't sure I had it in me to handle the answer. Maybe it was safer here. Maybe it was just quieter than dying slow in a saloon booth. Maybe she didn't know where else to go, and I didn't need to know more than that. She asked me then, why me? Same question, just sharper this time, like she was trying to cut into something that didn't have a name. I looked at her straight on, saw her hair pulled back, her eyes clearer than the night before, though still rimmed and tired. I told her the truth. You looked like you needed someone to stop the bleeding. She didn't speak after that, didn't need to. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It wasn't cold either. It just sat between us like a folded blanket. Useful if you let it be. That night, I left her the bedroom again. Didn't lock her in, didn't watch her walk down the hall. I just made sure the fire didn't die out, that the place stayed warm, that she had enough to eat and water to wash with. And I sat in my chair near the front window, staring out at the dark, thinking about how strange it felt to have someone else breathing under the same roof again. Not since the fire, not since the screaming, not since the silence that came after and stayed like a ghost I couldn't shake. The third morning, I heard her moving before I got out of bed, light footsteps, cautious. The door creaked. The stove clicked to life. I lay there listening, not wanting to spook her, not wanting to ruin whatever fragile thing had taken root. When I came into the kitchen, she was already sitting with a cup in her hands. She looked up like she hadn't meant to be caught. I didn't say anything, just poured myself some coffee and sat across from her. Her hair was wet. I'd left hot water out by the pump before dawn. Figured she might want to use it. She hadn't asked. I just did it. She noticed, though. The way her shoulders softened told me that. You ever going to ask why I was bleeding when you found me? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. No, I said. She looked surprised, like she'd expected the interrogation, like it was always part of the exchange. But I wasn't interested in carving her open just to look at the wounds. Don't you want to know? If you want to tell me, you will. That was my way. No pressure, no prying. I wasn't there to rescue her. I just didn't want to be the man who watched her sink and did nothing. She went quiet for a moment, then her voice came out steadier than before. I didn't steal from nobody, she said. Didn't lie. Didn't turn tricks behind anyone's back. I was just too slow going upstairs for a customer. I swallowed hard, let that truth settle. Didn't flinch, didn't answer. She blinked, eyes stinging. That's all? I didn't say I was sorry. I didn't offer pity. I just lifted the bucket beside me and said, "Water's hot. Don't wait too long." And that was it. No sermon, no lecture, just space. She didn't need a man to fix her. She needed a place where healing wasn't a performance. That afternoon, she swept the floors. I hadn't asked. I didn't expect it, but I saw her moving, slow and steady, working. The broom like it had been years since she touched something that didn't hit back. The windows were open, air moving through for the first time in months. The rugs were beaten out, dishes scrubbed. I watched from the doorway as she wiped the table down and muttered, "Sorry. I didn't ask if you wanted this done." I said, "No, it's good." She gave a small nod and kept wiping. Most folks, she said, didn't like a woman touching their things without asking. "I'm not most folks," I told her, and she smiled then. Just a flicker, but it was real. First one I'd seen on her. Maybe first one she'd given in years. She didn't ask if she could help. She just walked out to the fence line where I was working, dust already clinging to her boots, that coat of mine wrapped tight around her ribs like she was still holding herself together piece by piece. I'd been hammering posts since sunup, sleeves soaked through, sweat dripping from my brow, and I'd heard her approach before I saw her. Steps light, deliberate. She stopped beside me, eyes scanning the work, then said, "I can help." I paused, leaning on the post driver, letting the weight of her words settle. "You ever fix a fence?" I asked. "No," she said, "but I can learn." That was enough for me. I nodded once, pulled the coil of wire from where I'd slung it, handed it over, and pointed to the loose line. She didn't flinch, didn't wait for instructions, just set to work with hands that had seen worse than blisters. I watched her for a while, quiet, not correcting her when she fumbled, not stepping in when she cursed under her breath. She was figuring it out, one callus at a time. The sun climbed high, hot and unrelenting, and still she didn't stop. Wire cut her palms, left thin, angry welts, and the sleeves of that coat kept falling into her eyes, but she pushed through it like she'd decided she wasn't going to be helpless anymore, not even for herself. I kept working beside her. Neither of us said much. There was something about labor that made silence easier, like sweat had its own kind of language. I stole a few glances when she wasn't looking. Her jaw clenched when the wire fought back. Her eyes narrowed against the sting of it, but she didn't quit. Not once. And maybe that's what struck me most. Not that she was strong, but that she didn't even try to prove it. She just was. She needed this work like I needed the weight of a hammer in my hand, like we were both trying to dig out something buried in our own skin. By sundown, we were both beat. Dust clung to her hair, sweat traced down her temple, and when she limped back toward the house, I saw the way her body protested every step. I didn't say a word, just watched her go, then followed slow. The fence held. That's what mattered. And maybe she did too. That night, we ate simple. Bread, beans, a slice of salted pork I'd kept back from last week's trade. She sat across from me, hair damp from washing, hands raw but clean, sleeves rolled up, coat folded on the chair behind her, like she'd earned the right to take it off. She watched me while I chewed, like she was trying to decide if I was real, if this whole thing wasn't some elaborate trick waiting to unravel. "Why me?" she asked again, quieter now. "There's girls in town, prettier, cleaner." I looked at her, not the way a man looks at a woman he wants, but the way a man looks at a flame he thought had gone out and just realized was still burning. "You looked like you needed someone to stop the bleeding," I said again, because it was still the truth. Her eyes softened, but she didn't cry. Not Delilah. That wasn't how she bled. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I'm not used to kindness." I swallowed hard, looked down at my plate, then back at her. "I ain't offering kindness," I said. "I'm offering space." She didn't answer, just nodded slowly like she was chewing that over, like maybe space was the rarest thing she'd been given. When she went to bed that night, I waited until I heard the door click shut before heading to my own room. I didn't linger outside hers, didn't check in, didn't hover, but I noticed something different in the way the floor creaked beneath her steps, less cautious, more sure. And something about the house shifted too. Not loud, not bright, just breathing again, like it remembered how. The next morning, I woke to the sound of wind moving low through the barn slats, cold front coming. I sat on the edge of the bed a while, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, listening for signs of her. Nothing, no movement, no quiet steps, just stillness. I found her sitting up in bed, coat pulled around her, staring down at the floor like she'd been up for hours thinking. Her dress, patched, still a little tight, hung on the chair beside her. She'd washed it, wrung it out, hung it to dry from the window latch. She hadn't planned on staying, I knew that, but she hadn't run either, and that meant something. By the time I got to the kitchen, the stove was already warm, coffee brewing slow, just enough for two. One cup already on the table near her side. She poured herself some, stepped out onto the porch barefoot, quiet. I watched her from the hallway a minute, the way her hair caught the morning light, the way her shoulders didn't flinch at every breeze. I walked out to the trough, checked the pump, warmed water in a bucket in case she needed it. She came over with her cup clutched to her chest, my coat still loose on her frame. I didn't say anything right away, just let her stand there beside me. Her voice came soft. "You ever going to ask why I was bleeding when you found me?" "No," I said. She looked at me. "Don't you want to know?" I shook my head. "If you want to tell me, you will." She hesitated, then, in a voice that barely carried, said, "I didn't steal from nobody. Didn't lie. Didn't turn tricks behind anyone's back. I was just too slow getting upstairs for a customer." That hit hard, not because it shocked me, but because it didn't. Because I knew what kind of world she came from, and I hated that she still had to explain herself like it might fix something. I didn't say anything, just reached for the bucket beside me and lifted it. "Water's hot," I said. "Don't wait too long." And that was all she needed. Not a rescue, not a promise, just space. She didn't ask if she could clean the place, she just did it. I'd been out in the north pasture checking the far fence line, took longer than I thought, and when I came in, I found the door cracked to let air in, the scent of soap riding a soft breeze through the hall. The rugs were hanging from the porch railing, beat free of dust. The tin plates were drying on a cloth beside the basin, and there she was, down on her knees, sleeves rolled up, wiping the kitchen floor with a wet rag, like the silence in the house had started pressing too heavy on her chest, and she had to fill it with something. She looked up when I stepped in, a bit startled, like she'd been caught doing something forbidden. "Sorry," she said, standing quick. "I didn't ask if you wanted this done. I didn't think about it." She stepped back from the bucket like I might be angry, like she'd overstepped some line. I looked around. The counters were clean, the table scrubbed, the kind of clean that doesn't shine but feels good under your hand. I set the rope I'd been carrying on the nearest chair and said, "No, it's good." I saw it then, the way her shoulders dropped just a little, like she'd been bracing for some kind of blow and was still surprised when it didn't come. She went back to wringing out the cloth. Her hands moved with care, methodical, not rushed, just present. That was the word. She was here, in the room, not watching the door, not flinching at every sound. She said, "Most folks don't like a woman touching their things without asking." I met her eyes. I'm not most folks. That earned me the smallest smile, not big, not wide, but it hit me all the same, like a flicker of something warm under snow. "You keep saying that," she said, not quite teasing, but close. I shrugged, but inside, something shifted. I looked around the room like I was seeing it for the first time in months, maybe longer. The kitchen had always just been where I passed through. Eat, sit, leave the plate in the sink. I hadn't noticed the dust until it wasn't there anymore, and something in me stirred, quiet but firm, like the memory of a life I'd forgotten I wanted. "You hungry?" I asked, already heading for the bread box. She hesitated like the question was some kind of trick. I pulled out 2 pieces, set them on the pan, added a little pork fat from the tin beside the stove. She stood near the counter, not too close, but closer than before, watching, not waiting for anything, just present. We didn't speak while it cooked, didn't need to. The quiet between us had stopped being uncomfortable. It was just part of the house now, shared, lived in. When we sat down to eat, she glanced up at me and asked, careful and soft, "You ever lose someone?" I stared at my plate for a second, then said, "My boy was 5. House fire. My wife got him to the back room, tried to cover him up, but the roof came down. I didn't look up. I didn't need to see the sorrow in her eyes. I wasn't telling her for comfort. I was telling her because it was the truth. I was at the next property over," I said. "Tried to get back in. Couldn't." The words didn't come with tears. They came like dust off an old box, things left untouched for too long, but always there. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't reach across the table or touch my hand or say something soft to fill the space. She just nodded, slow, eyes low, like she understood exactly what kind of hole that left. "Then why now?" she asked, voice barely audible. I looked at her, really looked, and for a long moment, neither of us blinked. "Because I saw someone else who looked like they were already gone," I said. "And I figured if I could pull you back a little, maybe I'd find something worth staying for too." She didn't speak after that, didn't move either, but her eyes didn't drop. She held my gaze and let the silence stretch, and something in that quiet broke open, not like glass shattering, more like a door swinging open after too long shut. That night, she didn't lock her door. I noticed it when I passed the hall, saw the edge of it just ajar, the faint flicker of candlelight behind it. I didn't step in, didn't even pause, but something in my chest loosened, like a fist unclenching without me asking it to. I went to bed and listened to the wind push gently at the windows, the creak of the house shifting in its frame. No footsteps down the hall, no doors slamming, just 2 people breathing under the same roof, and it didn't feel like a mistake. The next morning, I was out early hauling feed. The air was crisp, touched with the scent of wet grass and pine. The storm had passed a few days back, but the ground still held the weight of it. I turned when I heard the porch creak behind me. She was standing there, wrapped in my coat, arms crossed, watching the yard like it had something to tell her. Her eyes were on me, steady and unreadable. She didn't say anything, not at first, but I saw the change. The night before had shifted something in her. She hadn't run, hadn't curled up like she was waiting to disappear. She'd stayed, and now she stood like she was thinking about tomorrow, like maybe she had one. I'd started thinking of the days with her like fence posts, one at a time, set deep in the ground, straight, solid. You don't notice the whole thing coming together at first, not until you step back and realize it's starting to hold. That morning, I was already out in the yard, hauling feed to the barn, trying not to think too much, just moving like I always had, letting the weight of the work carry me. I'd spent so long not speaking, not needing to, that it still felt strange when I'd catch myself waiting for the sound of her voice or the scrape of her boots on the porch. I'd thought maybe that part of me had died with the fire, the part that wanted company, wanted noise in the quiet. But now it was different. Now I found myself listening for her without even realizing I was doing it. She stepped off the porch a little after me, still wrapped in that coat, arms crossed tight under the sleeves, hair braided back. Her steps were steady now, not shy. She came toward me slow, like she wasn't rushing to prove anything but knew she belonged here. I kept working, didn't look up right away, didn't want to make it harder for her to say whatever she was carrying, but she beat me to it. "You fixed that lean-to yet?" she asked, nodding toward the back of the barn. I gave a dry laugh, just a breath through my nose. Wasn't high on the list. She stepped closer, boots crunching in the morning frost. "Well, it's falling in. I figure if I hold it up, you can brace the back." I looked at her then, finally, took in the flush on her cheeks from the cold, the steadiness in her eyes. "You're not bracing anything in that dress." She gave a real laugh, short but honest, and said, "Then find me something else to wear." 10 minutes later, she stepped out in a pair of my old trousers and a loose shirt, sleeves rolled up, buttons mismatched, the whole thing hanging awkward around her hips but mostly fitting. She paused at the door and caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. Didn't say a word, just stared for a moment. Not because she cared what she looked like, I don't think that mattered much to her anymore, but because maybe she didn't recognize the woman looking back. No makeup, no tight corset, just a raw face, clean, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled and hands ready. She looked better than I'd ever seen her. Not pretty, real. And maybe for the first time that was more than enough. She helped me lift the beam on the lean-to, even though it was heavier than hell and bit into her palms. She didn't complain. I could see her arms shaking from the strain, knees bent deep to keep her footing, but she didn't let go until I had the support in place. "All right," I said, after driving the last nail in hard. "Let it go." She stepped back and the thing held, steady. She stood beside me, panting a little, sweat shining at her hairline, dirt smeared across one cheek. "We make a decent team," she said. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. "Could use another set of hands around here." She tilted her head, eyes flicking over me. "You? Hiring?" I met her gaze. Might be." She smiled then, small, crooked but real. And for the first time since I met her, I smiled back, not out of politeness, not because I felt sorry for her, just because she made me want to. That evening, the wind picked up again, and I banked the fire higher than usual while she stirred a pot of beans at the stove. I watched her move, slow, confident, not flinching like she used to. Her sleeves were rolled again, her hands steady. She scraped the spoon along the bottom of the pot like she was doing something important, not just fixing a meal, but putting something back together that had cracked. I was at the table, working on a busted chair leg, sanding down the splinters with quiet care. She asked, out of nowhere, "How long's it been since you had someone in this kitchen with you?" I didn't answer right away, just kept sanding, then said, "Since the fire." She nodded. "Feels like a long time." And it did, not just because of the years, but because of the weight. Time stretches different when you carry it alone. She leaned back against the counter, arms folded, watching me. "You always this quiet? Or just around me?" I gave a small shrug. Words get spent too easy. I save mine for things that matter. She tilted her head, considering that. "So you haven't wasted a single one on me?" I looked up at her then, held her eyes. "No." Her face changed, not all at once, not like a tear breaking, more like a window inching open after being shut too long. The color rose in her cheeks, not from shame, from something scarier. Hope. That night, when the dishes were washed and the fire was low, she lingered near the coals, twisting the hem of the shirt she wore. I stood to head toward the hallway, paused, looked back. "You right?" I asked. She nodded, but she didn't move. I watched her a second longer, then turned. Before I made it down the hall, I heard her voice behind me, quiet. "You can stay out here if you want. I don't care if you do." I turned to see her standing there, quilt in her hands, not smiling, not asking, just offering something neither of us had words for. I walked back slow, took the quilt, but instead of laying it on the sofa, I followed her down the hall. She opened the door, stepped inside, turned back. "Stay," she said. "Not for that. Just stay." I nodded, quiet, stepped inside. She climbed into bed, pulled the covers over herself, and I sat in the old chair near the corner, arms resting on my knees, staring at the floorboards. I didn't speak, didn't need to. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like something broken. It felt safe. It felt like someone was still there. The wind had shifted by morning, colder now, sharper, the kind of breeze that cuts through damp earth and finds its way into your bones. I was already outside by the time the sun pushed past the hills, hauling feed. Across the yard, boots crunching in the frost. I didn't hear her at first, but when I turned back toward the house, I saw her standing in the doorway, wrapped in my coat, arms crossed, watching me. She looked different in the morning light. Softer somehow, less guarded. She hadn't said a word yet, but I could feel the weight of her thoughts from across the yard. I knew that kind of silence, knew what it meant to sit up half the night and listen to your own heartbeat like it doesn't know what to do with itself. I'd lived enough of those nights to recognize the look in her eyes, the kind that comes when you've made it through the storm, but you're still not sure what's left standing. She didn't move for a while, just watched me work, eyes tracking every step like she was trying to figure out if what we had here was real or just another temporary shelter before the wind came and took it all away. When she did finally step down off the porch, her boots hit the ground steady, like she'd already decided she was going to walk forward whether the ground welcomed her or not. She came close, looked me up and down, then tilted her head toward the barn. "You fixed that lean-to yet?" I glanced over my shoulder. "Wasn't high on the list," I said. She gave me a look, half amused, half daring. "Well, it's falling in. I figure if I hold it up, you can brace the back." I shook my head, let out a quiet laugh. "You're not bracing anything in that dress." She crossed her arms, narrowed her eyes. "Then find me something else to wear." It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't flirtation. It was just her way of saying she wasn't waiting to be rescued anymore. And I knew right then, if I didn't let her help, she'd do it anyway. She came out a few minutes later in a pair of my old trousers and a worn work shirt that hung loose across her frame. They didn't fit perfect, but they fit enough. She caught sight of herself in the mirror before we headed out, paused like she wasn't sure who she was looking at. No makeup, no ribbons, no cheap perfume masking bruises, just a woman with sleeves rolled, hair tied back, standing tall on her own 2 feet. And when she turned to me, I didn't see the girl from the saloon anymore. I saw Delilah, real and unhidden. She held the beam steady while I worked, arms trembling, face pinched with the effort, but she never once asked for me to take it from her. I drove in the last nail and stepped back. "Let it go," I said. She did. The frame held, dust swirled around us in the settling wind. She wiped her forehead with her sleeve, cheeks flushed, breath coming fast. We stood there a moment, shoulder to shoulder, not talking, just standing in something we built together. "We make a decent team," she said, voice low, almost surprised. I wiped my hands on a cloth, gave her the smallest nod. "Could use another set of hands around here." She looked at me then, really looked. "You hiring?" My eyes held hers. "Might be." She smiled, slow, cautious, but real. And for the first time since the fire, I smiled too. Not because I was trying to hide something, but because I wasn't. That night, the wind kicked up again, whistling low through the trees. The stove burned hotter than usual, and the house glowed amber in the corners, like it was trying to remember warmth. Delilah stirred beans at the stove, sleeves pushed high, one bare foot tucked up under her other leg like she'd lived there for years. I was at the table, fixing a busted chair leg. My hands moved slow, sanding the edge smooth. She asked, without looking at me, "How long's it been since you had someone in this kitchen with you?" I didn't lift my eyes. "Since the fire." She nodded, didn't press. "Feels like a long time," she said. I set the sandpaper down, leaned back in the chair, and looked at her across the space that no longer felt like a chasm. It was. She turned to face me, leaning against the counter, arms folded. "You always this quiet?" she asked. "Or just around me?" I gave a half shrug. Words get spent too easy. I save mine for things that matter. She smiled, just a flicker. "So you haven't wasted a single one on me?" I looked up then, didn't look away. "No." And I meant it. She turned back to the stove, busying her hands, but I saw the way her breath caught. Not from hurt, from something rarer. Hope. After supper, she lingered in the kitchen while I banked the fire. She twisted a towel in her hands, eyes shifting between the hall and me. I stood, dusted my palms on my trousers, nodded toward the back. "You right?" I asked. She nodded, but didn't move. Her voice came quiet. "You don't have to sleep out here, not if you don't want to." I paused. She held my eyes. "You can stay in the bed tonight. I don't care if you do." I felt the words settle between us, not heavy, but honest. She turned toward the hallway and I followed. Inside her room, she stepped to the bed, pulled the covers back, and slipped under them without another word. I didn't make a move until she looked over and said, soft, "Not for that, just stay." I nodded, sat down in the old chair near the corner like I had before. She didn't ask for anything else, and I didn't offer more than I meant. I just stayed. Minutes passed. She closed her eyes. Her breathing steadied. The room went still, and for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like an echo. It felt like belonging. The ground still held the weight of the storm even after the clouds had gone. You could feel it in the way the grass bent lower, in the hush between the trees. The kind of silence that don't shout or weep, just settles, deep and steady. That morning, I stepped outside like I always did, boots sinking into damp earth, feed sack over one shoulder. The chickens were scratching around the yard, feathers puffed against the chill, and the sky was that pale, washed-out blue that comes after a hard night. I looked up toward the porch, and there she was, Delilah, standing in the open doorway, my coat still wrapped around her like it had grown into her skin. She wasn't clutching it like armor anymore. She was just wearing it, comfortable, like she belonged. She didn't say anything at first, just watched me with those eyes that used to dart around every time a shadow moved. Now they held still. She crossed her arms, but not out of fear, just a habit. I saw something in her then, something I hadn't seen the first night I brought her home. That raw edge she carried had dulled, not gone, but softened in the way a scar softens after it's done hurting. She stepped down into the yard, boots crunching frost, and walked over slow, standing beside me as natural as if she'd always done it. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. Later that morning, she looked over at me while I split kindling. "I was thinking," she said, "I could head into town today, grab a few things, soap, sugar, maybe thread." I nodded, wiped my hands on a rag. "You all right going alone?" She paused, then nodded. "I think so. Just want to show my face. Let them see I'm not dead." I didn't flinch at that, just met her eyes and held them. "You sure they'll leave you be?" She gave the faintest smile. "I'm not afraid of them anymore," she said. "Not after here." She left after breakfast, riding the buckboard into Cross Hollow like a woman with a purpose. I watched her go, tall in the seat, back straight, hair tied back like always, and I realized then that it wasn't just her who'd been healing. It was this place too. Me. I hadn't thought I needed anyone, hadn't believed I ever could again, but seeing her there, in my coat, in my wagon, heading into a town that once tried to bleed her dry, I knew something had shifted for good. She came back just as the sun started leaning west. The light touched the front of the house like it was blessing it, like maybe even this land could forget the fire and sorrow it once held. She hopped down from the wagon, boots hitting the dirt, with that same quiet confidence I'd seen growing in her each day. She carried a basket, sugar, flour, tobacco for me, even though I didn't think she noticed I chewed, but she had. She noticed everything. I was out in the yard, stacking the last of the kindling. She walked up, handed me the tin. "Town still standing?" I asked. "Barely," she said, and gave me a look that made my chest warm in a way I hadn't felt in years. That night, she folded blankets at the foot of the bed while I lit the lantern. The house was warmer now, not just from the fire, from being lived in again, from voices and footsteps and soft things like laughter and bread baking. She turned toward me, eyes searching. "You think people will talk?" she asked. I nodded. "They already are. Does it bother you?" "I've been talked about before," I said. She stepped closer then. "I don't want to be your shame." I didn't even blink. "You're not." Her voice went quieter, steadier. "I'm not leaving." "I know." Then she reached up, touched the edge of my collar. "And I'm not broken anymore." I took her face in my hands, thumb brushing her cheek, and looked at her like she deserved to be seen. Not for what she'd survived, but for who she was now. "I never thought you were." I kissed her. Not to fix anything, not to take or claim or even promise, just because I wanted to. Because she did too. Her hands settled on my chest and mine circled her waist, and in that moment, everything we hadn't said didn't matter. The quiet between us was enough. We lay down together that night, not because of need, but because of choice, and for the first time in a long time, there was no fear between us, no ghosts we had to explain. Just breathe, just warmth, just the truth of two people who stayed long enough to become something. Somewhere in all of this, the work, the meals, the silence, I learned that not all wounds have to be reopened to be healed, that sometimes the best thing you can give a person isn't answers or pity, but a place to be still, a place to stop the bleeding. I thought I was past saving. I thought I'd buried every part of me worth keeping with my boy and the woman who tried to shield him from fire. But Delilah, she showed up, not asking for rescue, just a place to land. And in giving her that, I found something I didn't know I still had left to give. So if you're still listening, if you're still with me now, maybe there's a reason. Maybe something in you recognizes this kind of quiet. Maybe you've been burned too. Maybe you've sat alone in a house that forgot how to breathe. Or maybe you're just someone who still believes in slow, real things that don't ask for more than you can give. Either way, I'm glad you're here. If Delilah's story meant something to you, if you felt what I felt when she looked up at me like maybe I was worth staying for, I hope you'll do more than just watch. Like the video, leave a comment, tell me what stayed with you, and if you want more stories like this, quiet ones that don't shout but sit with you, follow the channel. There's more ahead, and sometimes, even when the fire's long gone cold, the coals still glow. All it takes is someone willing to stay.